Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Glam Chat. Today we're going to be discussing about eliminating shame from productivity discussions. If you notice you want to be more disciplined or productive in your life, you need to start from a place of love, not from a place of shame or blame or, any negative feelings towards yourself. There's a very toxic side of social media that tells you to stay hard, be disciplined, do all these habits to be a more disciplined person, but they stem from self-hate, they stem from lack of self-worth. You need to root your discipline, your productivity, everything you're doing to improve yourself from a place of self-love. It needs to be grounded in a place of self-love. And this is important because when you start loving yourself, and that's the reason why you want to be better, you realize that you're even falling in love with the process of being better, not from a place of shame, guilt, and, fear, even towards being a better person. I would say the foundation for productivity, discipline conversations is self-love. Before you even start thinking about how can I be a better person, how can I improve myself, how can I be more productive, how can I be more disciplined, think about how can I love myself enough that I just want this to be the natural occurrence in my life, the natural order of the day. How can I love myself more that it drives me to do better? How can I love myself more that it drives me to be more productive, efficient, because I know that it's ultimately helping me to be a better person. For example, now I'm showing you the self-love aspect in real time. The more disciplined you become, the more you start to implement habits that genuinely improve your life. You become more disciplined with your eating, maybe your sleep, things that I will believe matter to you. I'm just using my personal life. When I became more disciplined, it was easier for me to be more disciplined with things that mattered and would genuinely contribute to my health, like my sleep, eating better, doing productive things that would improve me as a person. But this discipline, if it starts from a place of hate, shame, there's a way that you have this negative burden over you to accomplish the things you want to accomplish. I came across a video of a guy some days ago who was trying to be more disciplined by insulting himself, calling himself names. And I think I went through the comment section and people asked, well, did it work? And I think he said something like kind of, or not exactly. Because when you start your growth journey or your personal growth journey from a place of shame and putting down yourself, even when you become the supposed best version of yourself, you had to hate yourself into getting there. You had to be unkind to yourself to getting there. What kind of self-growth are you doing if you have to be mean to yourself in the process? However, on the other hand, when your discipline and your productivity stems from a place of love, even when you don't do things right, you're like, okay, this is what I can do better. Okay, I didn't get this right today. I can do this. I've already come so far. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. You start to see yourself noticing your growth. But when it's from a place of shame, blame, and all these things I mentioned in the past, even when you grow, you don't see it because you're so hard on yourself. You're so hard on yourself that the immediate next thing is condemnation, even when you're making progress. I feel like this is so detrimental to your growth journey because when you start progressing, you're supposed to acknowledge this naturally. But if you keep condemning yourself and looking at every way you're falling short, how are you practically going to grow if you only see your flaws and you constantly shame yourself for those flaws? Do you know it is possible to acknowledge a problem area without condemnation? Like you can say, oh, I need to start working out more, and I just don't do it. You can acknowledge that without being like, oh, I'm so stupid, I don't go to the gym, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, and I don't do this, I need to start doing this. I'm so like, that is just, it's counterproductive because the worse you feel about yourself, the more you feel like you're not even someone that can be disciplined or productive, and you just stay in that loophole because you're in negative thoughts, you're in condemnation, you're just in a negative loophole. But when you start telling yourself, I can do this, I'm going to start implementing patterns to do this better, when you take a step forward, you celebrate yourself or you congratulate yourself, you start seeing yourself actually doing these things because there's some form of positive reinforcement primarily coming from you. Once you can identify that, the productivity conversations and the conversations around getting better and being a better person should stem from a place of self-love, I genuinely believe that this is when you start seeing real growth. This is personal advice and it's also advice that has worked in my life. I think that, learning every day, getting better, but doing it from a place of being positive to yourself, loving yourself, being kind to yourself is way better than doing it from the reverse. And don't get me wrong, just because you're being kind and nice to yourself doesn't mean that you treat what is happening as a joke. Example, this is what I would say Nigerians would say you're doing yourself. If you decide that you're on this growth journey, but you're not making any progress and and you're just being kind and nice to yourself and like patting yourself on the back, that's not going to help you. That's not going to help anybody. It's just going to keep you in the same cycle of where you've been and where you are. But what I mean by being kind and nice to yourself when you're genuinely on your growth journey is that when you're on that journey, if you notice that you're not meeting up with the expectations, the goals, the targets you set for yourself, you're looking for ways to improve genuinely, but being kind to yourself while on that journey. Not that you review what you set out to do and you notice you haven't gotten it yet, then you start condemning yourself. You're building an improper foundation for your self-growth journey, because at the end of the day, you would find that everything that you had built would have been built on a foundation of self-hate, shame, condemnation, which is why at the end of the day, when you even achieve all these goals, you realize that you still have a form of low self-esteem, and that low self-esteem is born by all the negative things you have said to yourself while you were on your self-growth journey. This is why every discussion on productivity and advancing yourself should stem from a place of love, because at the end of the day, when you realize that you've met your goals, or you're on the trajectory to achieving your goals, you would realize that your self-esteem genuinely begins to improve, because on this journey, all the things that you have said to yourself are positive things, they're encouraging things, they're uplifting things. So as you're on that journey, you start to feel uplifted, you start to feel better, you start to feel happy about yourself, because you know that you've been talking to yourself kindly. When your self-growth journey to be more productive, to be more disciplined is born from a place of self-love, that's when you find genuine, true, lasting self-esteem going forward, going down the line, because you've been able to build your self-esteem through this whole process. You've been able to build a true, genuine way you see yourself through this process, because throughout the process, you were talking to yourself kindly, you were encouraging yourself, you were seeing yourself grow. But if it started with negativity, shame, blame, condemnation, you will notice that even when you grow, when you become all these things you wanted to become, there is still this hint of low self-esteem, lack of self-worth. It's the same thing when people say that the way you talk to a child, it does something to them mentally and how they see themselves when they're growing up. The same way, if you're talking so negatively to yourself and saying all these bad things, there's a way you start to genuinely see yourself. You start seeing yourself as those things, because you have trained and conditioned yourself to believe that those things about you are true. So even now, when you look at your results and you look that you've genuinely achieved those goals because of the way you talked to yourself and coached yourself on the journey towards getting there, you still feel like those things you said to yourself. On the other hand, someone who had gotten to that position from genuinely wanting to grow, being very kind to themselves, being very positive on their journey, when they achieve the things they have achieved, you find that they are very, they're very proud of themselves. They genuinely start seeing themselves in the light of all the things they've been telling themselves throughout the journey, because they are positive and kind to themselves. Genuinely, that's what I think. I think this entire journey should stem from self-love, because that's the only way to build true and lasting self-esteem throughout your entire journey. I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to understand that your words have so much power over you. Oh my goodness. That's why it's so important to speak to you, the way you speak to yourself and the way you treat yourself throughout this journey of being a better person. No matter how much you are feeling, if you start, I just can't explain it. You start to become one with the things you say about yourself. If you tell yourself you're never going to make it, you can never do this, you're a failure, those things become your identity, and you can't let them become your identity when you're on a journey towards improving yourself. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to say? You need to get to a point where negative self-talk is foreign to your mind, where it's so rare that even when a negative thought comes in, it's like, what is this doing here? Because it doesn't normally exist in your mind. Picture this analogy. Let's say you have a green field. All the plants in the field are green, and you just see a black plant. It's going to be so easy to identify because it's out of place. That is how out of place negative thoughts and negative self-talk should be in your mind on your self-growth journey. It shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be there. And even if it does come, it's just so out of place. Like how I mentioned, the black plants would be out of place. It's like, what is this doing here? This isn't supposed to be here. This isn't part of my journey. The essence of me introducing this concept of eliminating shame from your growth journey is because I'll be talking more about productivity and discipline on my page. But before I do that, I need to set the foundation very straight. I've learned that the foundation is self-love. It has worked in my life, and I hope it works in someone else's life that has listened to this today. Bye guys.